Good evening. I'm so glad that you were able to join us again as we explore love languages. Tonight, I'm going to be talking a little bit about physical touch and the key points about what physical touch is, how important it is, and even the how negative physical touch impacts somebody with a physical touch love language. To start out though, I have this cute little video of the importance of physical touch to somebody who is craving it. So Shane, go ahead and play that video.
Here goes.
Oh, it's frozen. Okay. Can you tab through the video, or are we going to not have my PowerPoints up here? You hit the space bar. Is it going through? Technical difficulties, people. All right. If you hit the space bar, what happened, Shane? Okay.
Here goes.
Can you switch the screens? We might have to do without my PowerPoint today. It doesn't look like it. It looks like we have technical difficulties. I'm sorry. So we're just going to go on. So in this video, I'll just describe it to you. There's this little baby woke up from their nap, and Daddy's laying next to them, and they whine until they can crawl over and lay their head on Daddy's chest. And as soon as they lay their head on Daddy's chest, the world is all right again. And that to me is the epitome of what physical touch does for somebody who has that as their love language. It brings them a release, a relief. They have that, there's that sense that everything is right in the world when they receive positive physical touches. So the reason that I believe physical touch is so important, even if we don't have physical touch as our love language, physical touch is still very important to us because God created us with touch receptors. I am not a biology student. I haven't really taken a lot of biology classes, but I know that we have hundreds of touch receptors in our bodies. And those touch receptors receive messages through touch. We receive greetings through touch when we shake somebody's hand, when we hug somebody. We receive pleasure through physical touch. We get praise through physical touch, somebody patting us on the back. Unfortunately, we can also get messages of anger through physical touch or disgust. The most powerful message that we can get through physical touch, though, is the I love you message. And it's so important to have that I love you message. Even Jesus took time to give I love you messages through physical touch. In Mark 10, 13 through 16, this is the Passion Translation. It says, "The parents kept bringing their children to Jesus so that he would lay his hands on them and bless them. But the disciples kept rebuking and scolding the people for doing it. When Jesus saw what was happening, he became indignant with his disciples and said to them, 'Let all the little children come to me and never hinder them. Don't you know that God's kingdom exists for such as these? Listen to the truth I speak. Whoever does not open their arms to receive God's kingdom like a teachable child will never enter it.' Then he embraced each child, he laid hands on them, and he lovingly blessed each one." I feel like it's really important to understand, Jesus could have just stood there and said, "Bless you, bless you, bless you," kind of like we see sometimes. But no, he took time to physically give them a positive physical touch and communicate to them his love for them through physical touch as he was blessing them. And I do believe that that is so important for every kid. Every kid needs that. Every kid needs that physical touch. It has been shown, study after study has shown that that is one of the biggest ways that we nurture our children is through our loving physical touch with them. Babies who, like I talked about last week from the Romanian orphanages, the ones that were denied those physical touches, most of them, actually I think all of them, grew up with some kind of disability in their emotional growth. And so it's so important that we have loving physical touches for our children and for the people in our lives that is their primary love language. And even if it's not your primary love language, we crave it. One of the one of the things that I thought was very fascinating to me was during the pandemic that we had a huge uptick of pets being adopted. Like, there were actually, for the first time, all of these rescue shelters ran out of pets because people were running out and rescuing pets and adopting pets throughout that process. And I really think a lot of it had to do with that they were starving for physical touch because we were all isolated, and so they were looking for something to give them physical touches, and pets are really good at it. It's so funny because pets don't like ask your permission. they come up and they demand that you give your physical touch. We have a cat, and she's constant. I'll sit down and be watching TV, and she comes up and she's pushing against my side, and she's looking up at me like, aren't you gonna pet me? So it's very, it just was interesting to me that happened in a time in which there was so much isolation going on. But physical touch is expressed through positive physical contact with another person. Examples of that would be hugs, high fives, handshakes, pats on the back, even massages, hugs and kisses. These are all examples of positive physical touches. Studies suggest that affectionate physical touch can reduce stress and even improve our response during stressful situations because it lowers our stress hormones and our heart rate. I remember years ago, my oldest was a baby at the time. We had a young lady who was attending this church. She was about 15, 16 years old, and she was coming. Her grandmother brought her. That's how she ended up coming to our church. And so she was probably about 14 when she started coming, and then her grandma passed a couple of years later. And we went to the funeral home, and she greeted me, and I gave her a great big hug, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. And she just fell apart in my arms and probably cried for about five minutes as I was hugging her. And it's so powerful in times of stress when somebody can even just reach over and grab your hand. It just communicates you're not alone. I'm here with you. There's somebody here with you who understands. Physical touch is really powerful in communicating that I love you message. Physical touch is also very powerful in communicating physical attraction. Hugs, kisses, sex, all of that, we communicate to the person that we're physically attracted to that you're wanted. And that is another powerful communication that physical touch can do. Unfortunately, harmful physical touch communicates also. It communicates anger, disgust, what I talked about earlier. And the thing that we have to be very aware of is that if somebody has a physical touch as their love language, it is very devastating to them to receive a harmful physical touch message. It is more, obviously being slapped or pushed or kicked or any of that stuff is harmful all on its own. But if you have a physical touch as your love language, it is devastating to you and can wound you immensely in that process. So as we are raising children, we have to learn what is my child's love language, because whatever their love language is, the opposite has the ability to really wound them. And so for physical touch, it is things like hitting, slapping, and we have to just be really careful, even with things as innocent as tickling and wrestling. Like if that is something that the child's not enjoying and they have a love language that's physical touch, just that innocent tickling them, we think, we're having fun with them and we're being playful, but the message that they're actually getting is the opposite. So we have to be really aware of and adjust to our child's love languages. Physical touch is pretty easy. It's not a difficult love language to learn. And I say this as somebody who, this isn't my love language. This is way on the bottom, which is really funny because my husband's top 3 are physical touch, words of affirmation, and quality time. And My two low ones are words of affirmation and physical touch. And so what I've had to learn in my marriage is this was very important to him. I loved him. I never wanted him not to feel loved by me. But there were times in our marriage that he did. I remember one specific instance right after I had my firstborn, Shane. You know, I got busy. You know, I'm up in the middle of the night feeding the child. I'm learning how to be a new mom and still like keep my house and everything else. And so because I didn't need physical touch, it didn't even enter my head. And I remember it took about 6 months for him to say something to me. And then 9 months later we had Devin. So, but in that process, I had to adjust. I had to learn that physical touch was very important to him. And what I've figured out since then is it's, you know, it's not always about sex. A lot of times when married couples get into trouble and they go see a counselor and, you know, the husband is like, she's not, you know, physically demonstrative towards me, we're not having sex and everything else. It really isn't about sex. Sex, it plays a big part of it. Sex is a great physical touch tool, but it's not all about sex. What it is about is they want to feel like you love them and you value them, and they hear those messages through physical touch. It could be as simple as just patting them on the shoulder, holding their hand while you're walking through the store. It can be more intentional, like a massage. Even sitting on a couch with your physical touch child and watching football. If you're touching shoulder to shoulder, you're communicating to that physical touch person, I love you. If you're a couple, cuddling and watching TV is just as impactful to them. That is just as much of a powerful I love you message as having sex. Danny Silk talks about physical touch people as having an inner spring inside of them. And the longer they go without having that physical touch from the people that they love, the tighter that spring winds and winds and winds and winds, and the more tension and the more agitation that they feel. And then as soon as they get that I love you message through a physical touch, all of a sudden they're like, oh. It's like the spring unwinds and there's all this relief felt. And that is so important to understand. It's not that this is really important to them. This I love you message through physical touch is so important to them. Dr. Chapman talks about in his book that he was counseling a couple. They got married, they loved each other, they really didn't have a whole lot of life experiences that were causing problems, but they had two separate love languages. Hers was quality time, and his was physical touch, and they just weren't aware of it. And so, you know, as most married couples, you know, she started keeping her house and having children and, you know, living her life, and physical touch, because it wasn't as important to her, you know, was on the back burner and would just happen occasionally. Well, he really felt rejected by that because he wasn't getting that I love you message from his wife. And so pretty soon, he was spending all of his time on his computer because of the rejection. He was isolating himself from her, which is kind of counterintuitive if you really want if you want to be able to work things out, you got to like actually spend time with that person. But he was spending all of his time on his computer, which then her love language quality time started getting starved. And so then they became disconnected. And they ended up in Dr. Chapman's office and worked through some things and figured out what their love languages and made purposeful decisions to daily speak each other's love language to each other so that they could get to that place again where they felt connected. Dr. Chapman calls that person who isolates themselves and withdraws and that disconnection, he calls those people with empty love tanks. It's so important that as we're in relationship, this can be in relationship with our children, this can be in relationship with our husbands, our wives, our mothers, our fathers, whatever relationship that we are working on, that we value, that we want to be healthy, it is so important that we communicate I love you messages to that person in a way that they can clearly understand it. Like I said, my love language is acts of service. And you know, when I'm washing my dishes at my house, I'm telling everybody in my house, I love you. Well, I have 4 grown adult children that I'm pretty sure isn't hearing it that way. So I have to learn what their love language is and make sure that I'm communicating those messages in a way that they can clearly understand. And vice versa. In a relationship, I need to have those I love you messages sent back to me. And so it's so important that we learn each other's love languages and we speak those I love you messages, because those I love you messages are what is going to, I call it overdraft proof your relationship. It's like your relationship is a bank account. Yeah, with a bank account, I think all of us know, I know like I learned this really early on in my marriage. I'm not a great financial manager of money. My husband is, but I'm not. And so there were many times that I overdrafted our account. And being young, married, not making very much money, we didn't have overdraft protection. And so the bank, we gave them quite a lot of money in our early marriage years until I learned how to manage our money better. And actually there was one point in time in which it got so bad that like the bank called us, we had to come into a meeting and we had to have a discussion because they were on the verge of closing our account and not allowing us to have an account with them anymore because I had just did it too many times. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of the way a relationship works. We need to make sure that our I love you accounts are so full that when withdrawals are made on them, we're not going into the negative. Because just like a bank account, if you go into the negative too many times, you're going to end up with a closed account. And that's how relationships get broken, is because those I love you messages have not been enough to cover the withdrawals that happen. So in relationships, things like positive experiences, I love you messages, understanding, acceptance, all of those put your account, build your account with somebody. But unfortunately, disagreements, negative life experiences, conflicts, unnoticed efforts, personal attacks, broken trust, devastating messages spoken as the opposite of your love language. All of those make withdrawals on your relationship accounts. And if you have not padded your relationship account to the place that it could handle those withdrawals, you're going to end up in a bad situation where you might end up with not a relationship anymore in that process. You know, a lot of times those withdrawals, we make them. We've had a bad day, we say something ugly, we're tired, whatever it is, and we just don't use self-control, we make those withdrawals. But sometimes life happens, and those withdrawals are made whether we want them to be made or not. Last week we talked a little bit about like the death of a child. That is a major withdrawal on a relationship. And if a relationship hasn't been strengthened enough to handle that, it can become broken. So right now we're going to watch Dan Selk. He has a couple of great advice for us. Hopefully we can get the video running before we break up into our small groups. Okay, Shane, go ahead.
Am I on the square?
Yep. Can you hit play? Here we go.
What do you do when your spouse isn't responding to your love languages?
Oh, well, first thing you do is you feel rejected, and then you try to figure out if you're going to be punishing back and not giving their love language too. Is usually what happens. So that's probably not the thing to do. That's it's usually not a deliberate rejection. It's I don't feel as comfortable as you do with that language. I'm not as skilled at it as you are. I mean, some people just aren't skilled at affection. They're just not. They don't need affection, so they feel kind of weird touching other people. They're kind of,
Right.
you know, and so to think that you need so much affection is something's wrong with you. I shouldn't have to do this all the time. And so that usually takes time for them to get over their own anxiety of being more affectionate towards somebody that needs that. Quality time. You know, some people just don't need quality time. They don't need to be interested. They actually don't want somebody to be interested in them. I don't understand why you need me to be so interested in you all the time. That's, you know, there's something wrong with you if you need this from me. And so it takes a while for me to hear it. So first thing happens is I feel rejected. It's probably not a deliberate attempt. It's probably just anxiety in the person who doesn't really know how to speak that language very well. They're much more comfortable giving you a gift. I did your laundry. I did an acts of service. You're awesome. You're so awesome. You're so awesome. And so I'm going to affirm you instead of, you know, pick up my socks. Because, you know, what's the big deal? There's just socks. You're awesome. And so I'm going to be more comfortable and more skilled at what I feel comfortable doing. And not so much maybe with what it is that you need. So give me some time, give me a little time to practice. Stay open with me, keep telling me how it feels, you know, but keep your love on and keep speaking my love language so that we can stay connected while we work this thing out.
Right.
So I love that. I think
All you do with your doll, whatever doll it is literally just.
I love that. I think that is so important. We need to practice each other's love languages. The only way that we're going to learn how to speak it is practice it. Anybody who's learned how to speak a foreign language knows that in order to become proficient at it, you actually got to spend time speaking it, and it's probably going to look really awkward at first. I remember taking Spanish and my Spanish teacher laughing at me in the middle of our oral exercises. You know, so it's not something that's going to be comfortable, but the more that you do it, the better you become at it. All right, thank you so much for joining us, and now we're going to break up into our small groups.